Welcome back to Footnotes and Folly. I am Pemberton, this is part 33 and this is the one you have been waiting for. The Aeginetan hostages are lodged in Athens and then the great Persian expedition of Datis and Artaphan sweeps across the Aegean, island by island, and falls upon Eretria, which is betrayed, burned, and carried off into slavery. Then the fleet lands on the plain of Marathon, with old Hippias guiding them, dreaming of his tyranny restored. Athens sends to Sparta the runner Philippides meets the god Pan in the mountains, but the Spartans will not march until the moon is full. So the Athenians and their lone faithful friends the Plataeans go down to Marathon alone. Let us continue.
When VCTK came to Athens and asked for the deposit to be returned, the Athenians were unwilling to give up the hostages and produced excuses for refusing. They said that 2 kings had deposited them, and that they did not think it right to give them back to one king without the other. Since the Athenians said they would not return them, VCTK spoke to them as follows. Athenians, do whichever thing you yourselves desire. You know that if you give them up, you do what religion commands, and if you refuse to give them up, you do the opposite. But I wish to tell you what once happened in Sparta concerning a deposit. My Spartans report that in Lacedaemon, about 2 generations before my time, there was a man named Glaucus, son of Epicides. We say this man attained the highest merit in all other things, and especially that he had a good reputation for uprightness among all who then lived in Lacedaemon. In due time we relate the following happened to him. A man of Miletus came to Sparta and wished to speak with him, giving these reasons. I am a Milesian, he said, and I have come here wishing to benefit from your uprightness, Glaucus. Since there was great report of your uprightness throughout all the rest of Hellas, and also in Ionia, I considered with myself that Ionia is always in danger, while Peloponnesus is safely established. I also considered that we never see wealth remain long in the possession of the same persons. Reflecting on these things and taking counsel with myself, I resolved to turn half of my possessions into money and place it with you, being fully assured that if it were placed with you, I would have it safe. Therefore, I ask you to receive the money and take and keep these tallies. Whoever asks for the money back, and has tokens matching these, to him you must restore it. The stranger who had come from Miletus said this much, and Glaucus accepted the deposit on the proposed terms. After a long time had passed, the sons of the man who had deposited the money with Glaucus came to Sparta. They spoke with Glaucus, produced the tokens, and asked for the money to be given back. But he repulsed them, answering them in this way. I do not remember the matter, nor does my mind bring back any knowledge of the things you speak of. But I wish to recollect and to do everything that is just. If I received it, I wish to restore it honestly. But if I did not receive it at all, I will act toward you according to the customs of the Hellenes. Therefore I postponed settling the matter with you for 3 months from now. The Milesians went away grieving, for they supposed that they had been robbed of the money. But Glaucus set out for Delphi to consult the oracle. When he asked the oracle whether he should rob them of the money by means of an oath, the Pythian prophetess rebuked him with these lines. Glaucus, son of Epicides, yes, for the moment this is more profitable, to defeat their word by an oath and to rob them. Swear, since death awaits the man who swears truly as well. But know that oath has a son, nameless, handless, and footless. Yet without feet he pursues, without hands he seizes, and he shall wholly destroy the race and the house of the man who offends. But for the man who swears truly, his race is better afterward. When Glaucus heard this, he begged the god to pardon him for what he had said, but the prophetess said that to test the god, and to do the deed were equivalent things. Glaucus then sent for the Milesians and gave the money back to them. But the reason, Athenians, for which I set out to tell you this story shall now be told. At the present time, there is no descendant of Glaucus alive, nor any hearth that is recognized as belonging to Glaucus. He has been utterly destroyed and rooted out of Sparta. Thus it is good not even to entertain any thought about a deposit, except that of restoring it when those who made it ask for it back. When VCTK had spoken in this way, the Athenians were still unwilling to listen to him, and he departed back. The Aeginetans, before paying the penalty for their former wrongs, in which they had outraged the Athenians to please the Thebans, acted as follows. Complaining about the conduct of the Athenians and thinking they were being wronged, they made preparations to avenge themselves on the Athenians. Since the Athenians were celebrating a yearly festival at Sunion, the Aeginetans lay in wait for the sacred ship that was sent there and captured it, full of men who were among the foremost Athenians. After capturing it, they put the men in chains. After suffering this wrong from the Aeginetans, the Athenians no longer delayed in contriving every possible harm against them. In Aegina there was a man of reputation, Nicodromo son of Cnithus. This man had a complaint against the Aeginetans because they had previously driven him out of the island. Now, hearing that the Athenians had resolved to injure the Aeginetans, he made an agreement with the Athenians to deliver Aegina to them, telling them on what day he would make his attempt, and by what day they would need to come to support him. After this, Nicodromos, according to his agreement with the Athenians, seized what is called the Old City. But the Athenians did not come to support him at the proper time, for it happened that they did not have enough ships to fight the Aeginetans. While they were asking the Corinthians to lend them ships, their cause was ruined. The Corinthians, however, being at that time exceedingly friendly toward them, gave the Athenians 20 ships at their request, and they gave them by selling them at 5 drachmas each, because by law it was not permitted to give them as a free gift. Taking these ships, as I have said, along with their own, the Athenians sailed to Aegina with 70 ships manned in all, and they arrived 1 day later than the agreed time. Meanwhile Nicodromos, since the Athenians did not come to support him at the proper time, embarked in a ship and escaped from Aegina, and other Aeginetans went with him. The Athenians gave them Sunium to live in, and starting from there these men continued to plunder the Aeginetans who were on the island. This happened afterward. At the time in question, the well-to-do class among the Aeginetans prevailed over the men of the people who had risen against them together with Nicodromos. After getting them into their power, they were bringing their prisoners out for execution. Because of this, a curse came upon them that they were not able to expiate by sacrifice, though they devised every means they could against it. Instead, they were driven out of the island before the goddess became gracious to them. For they had taken 700 of the men of the people as prisoners, and were bringing them out for execution, when one of them escaped from his bonds and fled for refuge to the entrance of the temple of Demeter the giver of laws. He took hold of the latch of the door and clung to it. When they found that they could not drag him away from it by pulling him, they cut off his hands and so carried him away, while those hands remained clinging to the latch of the door. Thus the Aeginetans acted toward one another. When the Athenians came, the Aeginetans fought against them with 70 ships. After being defeated in the sea fight, they called to their assistance the same men whom they had summoned before, namely the Argives. The Argives would no longer come to help them, because they had cause for complaint. Ships of Aegina, compelled by Cleomenes, had put into the land of Argos, and their crews had landed with the Lacedaemonians. Men from ships of Sicyon had also landed with them in this same invasion. As a penalty for this, the Argives imposed a fine on them of 1,000 talents, 500 for each state. The Sicyonians, acknowledging that they had committed a wrong, made an agreement to pay 100 talents and be freed from the penalty. The Aeginetans, however, did not acknowledge their wrong, but were more stubborn. For this reason, when they made their request, no Argives came to their help at the public charge, but volunteers came, 1,000 in number. Their leader was a commander named Eurybates, a man who had practiced the 5 contests. The greater number of these men never returned, but were slain by the Athenians in Aegina. Their commander Eurybates himself, fighting in single combat, killed 3 men in this manner, and was then killed by the 4th, Sophanes of Decolia. The Aeginetans, however, engaged the Athenians in a naval battle when the Athenians were in disorder and defeated them, and they captured 4 of their ships, crews and all. So the Athenians were at war with the Aeginetans. Meanwhile the Persian was carrying forward his design, since he was constantly reminded by his servant to remember the Athenians, and because the sons of Pisistratos were close at hand and continually bringing charges against the Athenians. At the same time Darius himself wished to seize this pretext and subdue those nations of Hellas that had not given him earth and water. Since Mardonios had fared miserably in his expedition, Darius removed him from his command. Appointing other generals, he sent them against Eretria and Athens, Datis, who was a Mede by race, and Artaphernes, son of Artaphernes, the king's nephew. He sent them out with the charge to reduce Athens and Eretria to slavery and bring the slaves back into his presence. When these appointed commanders came from the king on their march to the Elaean plain in Cilicia, taking with them a large and well-equipped land army, they encamped there. Then the whole naval force came up, which the several nations had been ordered to provide, and with it came the horse-carrying ships that Darius had ordered his tributaries to prepare the year before. They placed their horses in these, embarked the land army in the ships, and sailed for Ionia with 600 triremes. After this they did not keep their ships close along the mainland toward the Hellespont and Thrace, but started from Samos and made their voyage by the Icarian Sea and between the islands. I think they feared above all else the voyage around Athos, since in the previous year, while making the passage that way, they had met with great disaster. Moreover, Naxos also compelled them to take this route, since it had not been conquered on the former occasion. When they arrived at Naxos, coming against it from the Icarian Sea, for the Persians intended to make their expedition first against Naxos, remembering the former events, the Naxians immediately fled away to the mountains and did not wait for their attack. The Persians enslaved those whom they caught and set fire to both the temples and the town. After doing this, they put out to sea to attack the other islands. While they were doing this, the Delians also left Delos and fled away to Tinos. When the armament was sailing in there, Datis sailed on ahead and did not allow the ships to anchor at the island of Delos, but at Renai on the other side of the channel. Having learned by inquiry where the men of Delos were, he sent a herald and addressed them in this way. Holy men, why have you fled away and departed, judging of me what is not fitting? Even I myself have wisdom at least so far, and moreover I have been commanded by the king not to harm at all the land in which the 2 divinities were born, neither the land itself nor its inhabitants. Now therefore return to your own possessions and dwell on your island. Thus he proclaimed to the Delians through a herald. After this he piled up and burned on the altar 300 talents weight of frankincense. After Datis had done these things, he sailed away with his army to fight first against Eretria, taking with him both Ionians and Aeolians. After he had put out to sea from Delos, the island was shaken. According to what the Delians told me, it had never been shaken before that time, nor was it shaken afterward down to my own day. No doubt the god revealed this as a sign to men of the evils that were about to come. For in the time of Darius son of Histastes, Xerxes son of Darius, and Artaxerxes son of Xerxes, 3 generations one after another, more evils happened to Hellas than during the 20 generations before Darius. Some of these evils came upon it from the Persians, and others from the leaders of Hellas themselves, as they fought one another for supremacy. Thus it was not unreasonable that Delos, which before had been unmoved, should be shaken. And in an oracle it had been written about it, Delos too will I move, though it has been unmoved before. In the Hellenic tongue the names just mentioned have these meanings. Darius means compeller, Xerxes means warrior, and Artaxerxes means great warrior. Thus the Hellenes might rightly call these kings in their own language. When the barbarians had departed from Delos, they touched at the islands as they went, and from them they received additional forces and took the sons of the islanders as hostages. As they sailed around the islands, they also put in at Charistos. Since the Charistans would neither give them hostages, nor consent to join an expedition against neighboring cities, meaning Eretria and Athens, the Persians began to besiege them and ravage their land, until at last the Charistans too came over to the will of the Persians. Meanwhile the Eretrians, having learned that the Persian armament was sailing to attack them, asked the Athenians to help them. The Athenians did not refuse their support, but gave as helpers the 4,000 men to whom the land of the wealthy Chalcidians had been allotted. The Eretrians, however, as it turned out, had no sound plan of action. While they sent for the Athenians, they had 2 different designs in mind. Some of them proposed leaving the city and going to the heights of Euboea. Others, expecting to win gain for themselves from the Persian, were preparing to surrender the place. Aeginetan son of Nauthan, one of the leaders of the Eretrians, learned the state of both these plans. He told the whole condition of their affairs to the Athenians who had come, and begged them to depart and go back to their own land, so that they too would not perish. The Athenians followed this advice given by Aeginetan. While they crossed over to Oropos and saved themselves, the Persians sailed on and brought their ships to land at Temenos, Chiori, and Aegaleia in the Eretrian territory. After taking possession of these places, they immediately began to disembark their horses and prepare to advance against the enemy. The Eretrians did not intend to come out and fight them. Their aim was, if possible, to hold out by defending their walls, since the counsel not to leave the city had prevailed. A violent assault was then made on the wall, and for 6 days many fell on both sides. But on the 7th day Euphorbos son of Alcamachos and Philagros son of Kynios, men of reputation among the citizens, gave the city up to the Persians. The Persians entered the city, plundered and burned the temples in repayment for the temples burned at Sardis, and reduced the people to slavery, according to the commands of Darius. After they had got Eretria into their power, they stayed a few days, and then sailed for the land of Attica. They pressed hard onward, supposing that the Athenians would do the same as the Eretrians had done. Since Marathon was the most convenient place in Attica for cavalry to operate, and was also very near Eretria, Hippias son of Pisistratos guided them there. When the Athenians learned this, they too went to Marathon to defend their land. They were led by 10 generals, of whom the 10th was Miltiades. His father Cimon son of Stesigoras had been forced to go into exile from Athens because of Pisistratos son of Hippocrates. While in exile, Cimon happened to win a victory at the Olympic Games with a 4-horse chariot, doing the same thing as his half-brother Miltiades had done, who had the same mother as he. Then afterward, in the next Olympic Games, he won a victory with the same mares and allowed Pisistratos to be proclaimed as victor. Having handed over the victory to him, he returned to his own native land under an agreement of peace. Later, after he had won again with the same mares at another Olympic festival, it was his fate to be killed by the sons of Pisistratos, Pisistratos himself being no longer alive. They killed him near the city hall, having set men to lie in wait for him by night. Cimon's burial place is on the outskirts of the city, on the other side of the road called the Way Through Coil, and directly opposite him are buried the mares that won in 3 Olympic Games. The same thing was also achieved by the mares of Euagoras the Laconian, but by no others besides these. At that time the elder son of Cimon, Stesigoras, was being brought up in the house of his father's brother Miltiades in the Chersonese, while the younger son was being brought up at Athens with Cimon himself, having been named Miltiades after Miltiades the settler of the Chersonese. This Miltiades then, at the time of which we are speaking, had come from the Chersonese and was a general of the Athenians, after escaping death in 2 forms. First, the Phoenicians had pursued him as far as Imbros and tried earnestly to capture him and bring him up into the presence of the king. Then, after he escaped them and came to his own native land, where from that time onward he seemed to be safe, his opponents, who had been lying in wait for him there, brought him before a court and prosecuted him for his despotism in the Chersonese. Having escaped these men also, he had then been appointed a general of the Athenians, being elected by the people. First of all, while they were still in the city, the generals sent a herald to Sparta, namely Phaedopides, an Athenian who was also a long-distance runner by profession and practiced this as his trade. As Phaedopides himself said, and as he reported to the Athenians, Pan happened to meet him by Mount Parthenion, which is above Tegea. Pan called aloud the name of Phaedopides and told him to report to the Athenians, asking why they had no care for him. though he was well disposed toward the Athenians, had been useful to them on many occasions before, and would be so again. The Athenians believed this story to be true, and when their affairs had by then been settled prosperously, they established a temple of Pan below the Acropolis. Because of this message, they propitiate him every year with sacrifice and with a torch race. At that time, however, the time when he said Pan had appeared to him, this Phaedippides had been sent by the generals, and was in Sparta on the day after he left the city of the Athenians. When he came to the magistrates, he said, Lacedaemonians, the Athenians ask you to come to their help and not allow a city most anciently established among the Hellenes to fall into slavery at the hands of barbarians. Even now Eretria has been enslaved, and Hellas has become weaker by the loss of a renowned city. He reported to them the message with which he had been charged. The Spartans were pleased to come to the help of the Athenians, but it was impossible for them to do so at once, because they did not wish to break their law. It was the 9th day of the month, and on the 9th day, they said, they would not go out, nor would they go until the circle of the moon was full. So they waited for the full moon. Meanwhile, Hippias, son of Pisistratos, was guiding the barbarians into Marathon, after seeing a vision in his sleep during the previous night. It seemed to Hippias that he lay with his own mother. From the dream he guessed that he would return to Athens, recover his rule, and then end his life in old age in his own land. This, I say, was what he guessed from the dream. After this, as he guided the Persians in, he first disembarked the slaves from Eretria on the island belonging to the Styrians, called Aeginetan. Then, when the ships came into shore at Marathon, he moored them there, and after the barbarians had come from the ships to land, he set about arranging them in their positions. While he was ordering these things, he was seized by sneezing and coughing more violently than usual. Since he was advanced in years, most of his teeth were shaken by this, and by the force of the cough he cast out one of them. The tooth fell from him onto the sand, and he was very eager to find it. But when he searched and the tooth could not be found, he groaned aloud and said to those beside him, This land is not ours, nor shall we be able to make it subject to us. The tooth possesses as much share in it as belonged to me. Hippias then guessed that his vision had been fulfilled in this way. Meanwhile, after the Athenians had been drawn up in the sacred enclosure of Heracles, the Plataeans came to join them in a body as allies. The Plataeans had given themselves to the Athenians, and before this time the Athenians had undertaken many labors on their behalf. This is how they gave themselves. Being oppressed by the Thebans, the Plataeans first wished to give themselves to Cleomene son of Anaxandrides and to the Lacedaemonians, who happened to come there. But the Lacedaemonians did not accept them, and said to them, We live too far away, and such support as ours would be cold comfort to you. You might be reduced to slavery many times before any of us even had news of it. We advise you rather to give yourselves to the Athenians, who are your neighbors and not bad helpers. The Lacedaemonians advised this not so much because of goodwill toward the Plataeans, but because they wanted the Athenians to have trouble by becoming involved in conflict with the Boeotians. So the Lacedaemonians gave this advice to the men of Plataea, and the Plataeans did not fail to follow it. When the Athenians were sacrificing to the 12 gods, the Plataeans sat down as suppliants at the altar and in this way gave themselves. When the Thebans learned of these things, they marched against the Plataeans, and the Athenians came to their aid. As they were about to join battle, the Corinthians, who happened to be there, would not allow them to fight, but reconciled the quarrel. Both parties put the matter into their hands, and the Corinthians laid down boundaries for the land on the condition that the Thebans should leave alone those Boeotians who did not wish to be counted with the other Boeotians. After giving this decision, the Corinthians departed. But as the Athenians were going back, the Boeotians attacked them, and when they attacked, they were defeated in the fight. After that the Athenians passed beyond the boundaries that the Corinthians had set for the Plataeans, and they made the river Asopos itself the boundary of the Thebans toward the land of Plataea and toward the district of Hyce. The Plataeans then had given themselves to the Athenians in the way that has been described, and at this time they came to Marathon to bring them help. The opinions of the Athenian generals were divided. One party urged that they should not fight a battle, since they were too few to fight against the army of the Medes. The others, among them Miltiades, advised that they should fight. When they were divided and the worse opinion seemed likely to prevail, Miltiades went to Callimachos of the deme of Aphidnae, who had been chosen by lot to be polemarch of the Athenians. The polemarch had a vote in addition to the 10 generals, for in ancient times the Athenians gave the polemarch an equal vote with the generals. Miltiades came to him and said, Callimachos, it now rests with you either to bring Athens under slavery, or, by making her free, to leave behind you for all the time that men shall live a memorial such as not even Harmodios and Aristogiton have left. For the Athenians have now come to the greatest danger they have ever faced since they became a people. On the one hand, if they submit to the Medes, it is decided what they will suffer when they are delivered over to Hippias. On the other hand, if this city wins the victory, it may become the first city of Hellas. How this may happen, and how the decision of these matters has come to you above all men, I will now tell you. We generals are 10 in number, and our opinions are divided. One party urges that we fight a battle, and the other that we do not fight. Now if we do not fight, I expect that some great spirit of discord will fall upon the minds of the Athenians and shake them, so that they will go over to the Medes. But if we fight a battle before any unsoundness appears in any part of the Athenian people, then, if the gods grant equal conditions, we are able to win the fight. All these things now belong to you and depend on you. If you attach yourself to my opinion, you have a free fatherland and a native city that shall be first among the cities of Hellas. But if you choose the opinion of those who are eager not to fight, you will have the opposite of the good things I have told you." By speaking in this way, Miltiades won Callimachus to his side. Once the polemarch's opinion was added, it was decided to fight a battle. After this, those generals whose opinion favored fighting gave over their command to Miltiades when each man's turn came to command for the day. Miltiades accepted this, but he would not yet bring on a battle until his own turn to command had come. When that turn came to him, the Athenians were drawn up for battle in the following order. On the right wing the polemarch Callimachus was leader, for the custom of the Athenians then was that the polemarch should hold the right wing. With him leading, the tribes came next in order, numbered one after another, and last the Plataeans were drawn up, occupying the left wing. For ever since this battle, when the Athenians offer sacrifices in the solemn assemblies held at the 4 yearly festivals, the herald of the Athenians prays that blessings may come to the Athenians and the Plataeans both. On this occasion, when the Athenians were being drawn up at Marathon, something like this was done. Their army was made equal in length of front to that of the Medes, but in the middle it was drawn up only a few ranks deep, and there the army was weakest, while each wing was strengthened with greater numbers. When they had been arranged in their places and the sacrifices proved favorable, the Athenians were released for battle and set out at a run to attack the barbarians. The space between the two armies was not less than 8 furlongs. When the Persians saw them advancing at a run to attack, they prepared to receive them. In their minds they charged the Athenians with a madness that must be fatal, because they were few and yet were pressing forward at a run, with neither cavalry nor archers. Such was the thought of the barbarians. But when the Athenians, all in one body, joined battle with the barbarians, they fought in a memorable fashion. They were the first of all the Hellenes known to us who went at a run to attack the enemy, and they were also the first who endured the sight of the Median garments and the men who wore them. Up to that time, the very name of the Medes was a terror for the Hellenes to hear. They fought for a long time at Marathon. In the center of the army, where the Persians themselves and the Sacians were drawn up, the barbarians were winning. There, I say, the barbarians had broken the ranks of their opponents and were pursuing them inland. But on both wings, the Athenians and the Plataeans separately were winning the victory. Having won, they let the part of the barbarians that had been routed flee without molestation, and brought the two wings together to fight those who had broken their center. The Athenians were victorious. They followed after the Persians as they fled, slaughtering them until they came to the sea. There they called for fire, and began to seize the ships. In this part of the action the polemarch Callimachus was killed, after proving himself a brave man. One of the generals, Stesilaus son of Pharsilaus, was also killed. In addition, Cynageros son of Euphorion, while taking hold of the ornament at the stern of a ship, had his hand cut off with an axe and fell. Many other Athenians of note were killed as well. In this way the Athenians got possession of 7 of the ships. With the rest, the barbarians pushed off from land. After taking the captives from Eretria off the island where they had left them, they sailed around Sunion, intending to reach the city before the Athenians. An accusation became current among the Athenians that they had formed this plan by contrivance of the Alcmaeonidae, for it was said that these men, having made arrangements with the Persians, displayed a shield to them after they had already embarked in their ships. The Persians then were sailing around Sunion. Meanwhile, the Athenians came back to the rescue of the city as quickly as they could, and they arrived there before the barbarians came. Having arrived from the temple of Heracles at Marathon, they encamped at another temple of Heracles, the one in Cynosarges. The barbarians came and lay with their ships in the sea off Phaleron, for this was then the seaport of the Athenians. They anchored their ships off this place, and then sailed back to Asia. In this fight at Marathon, about 6,400 of the barbarians were killed, and 192 of the Athenians. Such was the number that fell on both sides. It also happened that a marvel occurred there of the following kind. An Athenian, Epizelus son of Cuphagoras, while fighting in the close combat and proving himself a brave man, lost the sight of his eyes, although he had received no blow on any part of his body and had not been struck by a missile. From that time onward he continued blind for the rest of his life. I was informed that he used to tell this story about what had happened to him. It seemed to him that a tall man in full armor stood against him, whose beard overshadowed his whole shield. This apparition passed him by, but killed the comrade who stood next to him. Thus, as I was informed, Epizelus told the tale.
And there we will pause, on the field of Marathon, with the Persians driven back to their ships, and the first great victory of Greece over the East won by men who ran at the enemy across a mile of open ground, and the Spartans arriving a day too late to walk the battlefield and admire the dead. Next time, in the last part of the book, part 34, a mysterious shield flashed from a mountainside, the bitter fall of the victim Miltiades, and an old dark crime on the island of Lemnos. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.